नवतितमः पाठः। अस्मिन् वर्गे शत्रुशानच् प्रत्ययोः प्रक्रियायाः अध्ययनं प्रारभामहे। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयं नमस्कृत्य तदुक्तिः परिभाव्य च वैयाकरणसिद्धान्तकौमुदीयं विरच्यते। सिद्धान्तकौमुद्याः कृदन्तप्रकरणस्य वर्गस्य पञ्चप्रयोजनानि। सिद्धान्तकौमुद्याः कृदन्तप्रकरणस्य सर्वेषां सूत्राणां विस्तारेण अध्ययनं। यत्र आवश्यकं तत्र अन्येषां व्याख्यानानां साहाय्येन शास्त्राध्ययनं। सर्वेभ्यः धातुभ्यः यथा योग्यं कृत् प्रत्यययोजनं। कृत् प्रत्ययेषु परेषु रूपनिर्माणप्रक्रियायाः अभ्यासः तथा च अष्टाध्याय्याः तृतीयाध्यायस्य कंठस्थीकरणम्। Before we move on, I have a few questions over here or few messages. I just want to clarify that there is actually some issue with Sanskrit from Home website. So some of you have already messaged me that the website is not opening. Yes, their team is aware of this and their team is working on it. And I think most of you must have also got a message from Vyoma team saying that they are working on it. They should be able to fix it as soon as they can. So till now, the PPTs and the worksheets are not available, but videos are accessible through YouTube. So you should be able to access the videos from YouTube. प्रारभामहे। पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे अस्माभिः शत्रुशानच् प्रत्ययोः सूत्राणि दृष्टानि। वर्तमानकालनिर्देशकाः प्रत्ययाः। तत्र प्रारम्भे लटशत्रुशानचाव प्रथमा समानाधिकरणे संबोधने च लक्षणहेतोः क्रियायाः एतैः सूत्रैः शत्रुशानच् प्रत्ययौ लट् लकारस्य आदेशरूपेण विधीयते। तदनन्तरम् इंधार्यो शत्रुकृच्छिणी द्विषो मित्रे सुयो यज्ञसंयोगे अर्ह प्रशंसायाम् एतैः सूत्रैः शत्रुप्रत्ययः धातोः साक्षात् विधीयते। अद्यतनवर्गे शत्रु तथा शानच् प्रत्ययोः प्रक्रियायाः विषये पश्यामः। So today's class and tomorrow's class we will be discussing and completing the prakriya for Shatru and Shanach pratyayas. Now before I actually jump onto prakriyas, तत्र कश्चन विशेषः इदानीं स्मर्तव्यः। शत्रु तथा शानच् प्रत्ययौ त्रिषु अवस्थासु नो चेत् त्रयाणां विषयाणाम् अत्र उपस्थापनं कर्तुं शक्नुवन्ति। तत्र वर्तमाने कर्तरि सामान्यरूपेण शत्रु तथा शानच् प्रत्ययः भवितुम् अर्हति। So you can have patha plus shatru or you can have bandha plus shanach. That's the normal way a shatru and a shanach pratyaya is used, and that is the prakriya that we will study across these two classes today and tomorrow. धातोः लट् लकारस्य आदेशरूपेण शत्रु प्रत्ययः तथा शानच् प्रत्ययः कथं भवति इत्यस्मिन् विषये सूत्राणि सम्यक् रूपेण पश्यामः। You can also have shanach pratyaya in the bhava karmani sense, where you first add a yak pratyaya, sarvadhatuke yak, and then you add a shanacha. So for example, you say patha, you convert it to pathya, and then you say pathyamana. Or you take dukroi, kru, you convert it to say kriya, and then you say kriyamana. So in that particular process, yatra bhava karmanoho shanach pratyaya vidhiyate, tatra sopana dvayam asti. Initially, there is a separate bhava karma prakriya of attaching yaka pratyaya to the dhatu. That's a completely separate prakriya. That's a separate course of studying bhava karma prakriya. We are not going to discuss that in this course. Once the anga of yak pratyaya is created, later on what happens, you can add shatru and shanach. Then there is literally no prakriya. You either do ato gune. So for example, you have say not even atoguni, you just do ani mugagama. So for example, you have say patha, you add yaka on it to get pathya, and then you have shanach pratyaya, because there is an adanta anga, you do ani mukha and pathyamana iti bhavati. So somebody is pointing, you're right, we have done something similar when we were talking about nicha pratyaya. So you add a nicha pratyaya to create an atideshika dhatu, and then you add all krit pratyayas. So in this course, we did not study the prakriya for adding nich pratyaya, because that's an altogether different course. That's a Nijanta Prakaranam course, not a Krutanta Prakaranam course. So tatra णिच् प्रत्यये कृते किंचिद अंगम सिद्ध्यति इति मत्वा एव अस्माभिः अग्रे प्रत्यय विधानं कृतम्. In the same way, what we are going to do over here is when yaka is added, some anga is created. We will assume that, and then there is no prakriya. All that you have to do is anemukha, the sutra that we saw in the previous class. Similarly, भविष्यति भविष्यत् कालस्य निर्देशार्थं यत्र लृट् लकारः प्रयुज्यते तस्य आदेशरूपेण यदा शत्रु तथा शानच् प्रत्ययो भवतः तत्र अपि शत्रु तथा शानच् प्रत्ययोः योजनात् पूर्वं स्यतासील् लृटोः इत्यनेन तत्र स्य इति विकरण प्रत्ययः आगच्छति. Now this sya pratyaya has its own nuances. There are some sya pratyaya specific idagama related sutras also. So for example, kru dhatu, which is anit, actually gets an idagama in presence of sya pratyaya, and you say karishyati. So then the prakriya for sya pratyaya again is a separate prakriya. One might study it as a part of say tinganta prakaranam or ardhadhatuka prakaranam and so on. So again, we will not be going in the details of what happens when sya is added. Once sya is added and adanta anga is created, and then you can do shatru pratyaya, ato gune will give you the final form, or you can do a shanach pratyaya, anemuk will give you the final form. So stha, sthasya, asa, bhavishya, kru, karishya, that part we are not going to deal with. Once sthasya, bhavishya, karishya is obtained, then you can attach shatru, which is a simple process of ato gune, or you can attach shanach, which is a simple process of anemuk. Therefore, in this particular set of classes today and tomorrow, kevalam kartari shatru pratyayah nochet kartari shanach pratyaya yada bhavati tada rupa siddhihi katham bhavati idanim asmabhihi pathishyate dhatoho yaka iti vikarana pratyayam krutva kim bhavati nochet sya iti vikarana pratyayam krutva kim bhavati tasmin vishaye asmin varge charcha na bhavishyati. With this background, let us now actually start with Vartamane Kartari Vihitayoho Shatrushanach Pratyayoho Prakriya. So somebody as is pointing over here is that this Prakriya will be is going to be very similar to the Tinganta Prakriya. Somebody has actually sent a message. That is absolutely correct, because last time we saw that it is very easy to do a Shatru Pratyanta form by starting with Prathama Purusha Bahuvachanam or Prathama Purusha Dvivachanam or Prathama Purusha Ekvachanam forms. So the Tinganta Prakriya is very similar. In fact, Tinganta Prakriya is a bigger superset, is a superset of Shatru Shanach Prakriya, because in Tinganta Prakriya you have to deal with Madhyama Purusha also, Uttama Purusha also, other places or other things also. In this particular Shatru and Shanach Prakriya, it is only one. For Shatru Prakriya, you have to think about Prathama Purusha Bahuvachanam. The Prakriyas are similar. And for Shanach, it is Prathama Purusha Dvivachanam. The Prakriyas are similar. Which also means that many of you who have already studied the Sarvadhatuka Khanda, the Tinganta Prakriya Sarvadhatuka Khanda, which is, I assume, most of you or all of you who should have already studied Tinganta Prakriya earlier, for you, most of the stuff is going to be pure revision or recapitulation. So almost no new sutras in tomorrow and today's class. Everything that you have already studied. We will learn a little bit of Shastra aspects that we have not, or that were not covered at that particular point in time, or that are usually not covered in a Prakriya class. So as I mentioned, our class is a combination of a Prakriya class and a Shastra class. So for example, there are some very beautiful Shastra aspects associated with Anemukha, which I have not yet discussed. I quickly referred to that sutra last time. So these are the sutras, these are the things that we will study in this class. Otherwise, it's going to be a quick rush through all these sutras. Tatra asmabhi kim smartavyam maya varge etani sutrani pathyante chedapi bhavantah sarve punaha etesham adharena prakriya lekhanam yavat na kurvanti tavat etesham sarvesham sutranam samyak adhyanam neva bhavitum shakyate. You have to come back and you have to work out these prakriyas. When it comes to prakriyas, the only thing that is going to help you is practice. When it is Shastras, like for example, reading the same thing 3 times, 4 times, thinking about it actually makes the concept quite clear in the brain. But when it comes to Prakriyas, you think you are able to do it, but you have to actually work out the things, and only then it is possible. And only then you'll realize if you know or not. Ataha atra adyatana varge tatha shvastana varge yat kimapi asmabhi pathishyate tasya vishaye punaha tasya tesham sutranam prayogaha lekhanam रूपाणां सिद्धिः अवश्यं करणीया इति अत्र उक्त्वा प्रारभामहे. So we'll start with our regular flowchart. I have that flowchart kept over here. We start with Krudvritti. This flowchart is our, ultimate goal or, ultimate resting point. We have to go through this flowchart. I have been mentioning again and again, we cannot jump over this flowchart. It's going to cause problems in Prakriya. So प्रारभामहे तत्र प्रारंभे कृद्वृत्तिः तत्र पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे एव अस्माभिः पठितानि सर्वाणि सूत्राणि अत्र मया दत्तानि लटशतुषान् चाव प्रथमा समानाधिकरणे संबोधने च लक्षणहेतवो क्रियायाः इङ्धार्यो शत्रकृच्छिणी द्विषो मित्रे सुयो यज्ञसंयोगे अर्हः प्रशंसायाम् इत्येतेषां सर्वेषाम् अत्र वृत्तिः. सो लक्षणहेतवो क्रियायाः इत्यस्य वृत्तिः कथं भवेत्? अनुशासने तिष्ठति इति लक्षणम् अस्य. The one who stands up, and that's the sign that he is going to order a punishment. अनुशासने तिष्ठति इति लक्षणम् अस्य. और द्विषो मित्रे, so it's the शत्रु इति द्विषन्. अर्हः प्रशंसायां, प्रशंसापूर्वकम् अर्हति. He is eligible, but we are saying that with a gaurava. प्रशंसापूर्वकम् अर्हति, सः अर्हन्. एतानि सर्वाणि अत्र कृद्वृत्तिवाक्यानि सन्ति, अनन्तरं द्रष्टुं शक्यते. The next step is itsanya lopa, nothing upadesha junasiketa halantyam and so on. Prakrutika karyam, dhatvadesha sahano naha iditonum dhatoho, everything is the same. There is nothing new. The third step is pratyavivakshayam dhatav parivartanam. If you go to the flow chart, we see this over here, krud vishayakam parivartanam, step number 3. This is only in the ardha dhatuka adhikara. So 2.4 is ardha dhatuka and 6.1 is adecha upadeshe ashiti. So अत्र अस्मिन् सोपाने अस्माभिः ज्ञायमानं पठ्यमानं सर्वं कार्यम् आर्धधातुक प्रत्ययविशिष्टम् अस्ति, नो चेत् अशित् प्रत्ययविशिष्टम् अस्ति. Here we have Shatru and Shanach. They are not ardhadhatuka pratyayas, they are shit pratyayas, and therefore Shatru Shanach pratyayo vishaye pratyavivakshayam kimapi dhatau parivartanam na bhavati. So asa is not going to become bhu, bru is not going to become vacha, and no other transformations are going to happen. Tadanantaram chaturthaha sopanah pratyavidhanam. So we know the pratyayas are Shatru and Shanach. Both of these pratyayas are ajadi pratyayas. We will have ajadi pratyaya vishishtam karyam. Both of these are sarvadhatuka and both of these are apita. Because they are sarvadhatuka and apita, there will be nitvad bhava and then we'll have nit specific karyas going ahead. So these are the points that we need to note. Shatru pratyay shakara rukaro it samnyako ata iti avashishyate. Shanach pratyay chakara it samnyaka shakara it samnyaka ana iti avashishyate. Tadanantaram next sopanam upapada samasah. Again, Shatru and Shanach are attached directly to the dhatus. Atah atra upapada samasah eva nasti. Yatra upasargah asti tatra gati samasah asti iti uchyate. So by now, I think all of you know clearly the difference between upapada samasa and gati samasa. Upapada samasa happens when there is an explicit upapada, which is definitely not the case over here. The next step is either idagama or gana vikaranam. Because it is a sarvadhatuka pratyaya, we will have gana vikaranam. So after all the step 5 is over, step number 6 is either the vikarana pratyaya or idagama. Idagama happens for ardhadhatuka pratyayas, vikarana happens for sarvadhatuka pratyayas. Again, for vikarana, we have studied all these sutras earlier. Most of you or all of you are expected to know this. Kartari shapa. Then that shapa undergoes a luka by adiprabhutibhya shapaha, or it undergoes a shlu by juhotyadibhya shluhu. Then we have divadibhya shana, swadibhya shnu, tudadibhya shurdadibhya shnam, tanadikribhya u, kradibhya shna. So various ganas, one vikaranam for each gana. For the churadi gana, rich pratyaya is not a vikarana pratyaya. Sanadi pratyaya asti, rich pratyaya krute, punaha tatra shapa iti sarvadhatuka iti vikarana pratyaya kartari shapa iti autsargika rupena vidhiyate. This entire section of vikarana pratyayas, which starts all the way at sarvadhatuke yaka, kartari, shapa, and so on, has also some special sutras which we have studied all the way in class number, I think 17 or 18. I had sent an email on the group to revise that particular class. So va bhrasha bhlasha bhramuk kramuk klamuk trasit truti lashaha. Ete sarve dhatavah santi, etesham sarvesham dhatunam vishaye shan iti pratyayah va bhavati vikalpena bhavati. Va bhrasha bhrasha bhramuk kramuk klamuk trasi truti lashaha. Just give me 1 minute. So there is a question over here. there is no Bhwadigana in the previous slide? That is actually a good question. There is no Bhwadigana because Bhwadigana does not have a Vikaran Pratyaya associated with it. Understand how Panini organizes this. Kartari shapaityena sarvebhyah dhatubhyah shap pratyaya vidhiyate outsargika rupena. Blocking that, Gana number 2, Gana number 3, Gana number 4, Gana number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they have specific Vikarana Pratyayas. So you get rid of them. Kim avashishyate? Gana number 1 and Gana number 10. So Prathama Ganaha Tatha cha Dashama Ganaha Etesha Etebhya Sarvebhya As Etayoh Ganayoh Vidyamanebhya Sarvebhya Dhatubhya Shapaitya Utsargika Rupena. And therefore there are some other Dhatu Pathas, not the Panini Dhatu Patha, but other Dhatu Pathas which list all these Ganas in the beginning. They will list Adadi Gana and Juhotyadi Gana and so on in the beginning, and then they will say Shesha is Bhadi Gana, where there is no particular overridden Gana Vikarana over there. But the way Panini has organized, individual overrides are present over here and everything else gets Shapa. Satra Vishesha Vidhanasya Asmabhidanim Chintanam Kriyamanamasti Va Bhrasha Bhlasha Brahmukramuklamutrasi Trutilashaha Va Ityukte Shan Pratyaya Vikalpena Bhavati Ete Dhatavah Yasmin Gane Vidyante Tasya Ganasya Vikarana Pratyaya Tatra Pakshe Vidhiyate. So some of these are actually in the Divadi Gana itself. So Brahma, Klama, Trasa, they're actually in the Divadi Gana. So Tatra Divadi Ganasya Shan Pratyaya Yaha Nityam Purva Rupena Vidhiyate Tasya Vikalpaha Atra Siddhyati. Saha Atra Vikalpyate Pakshe Outsargika Shap Pratyaya Bhavati. So this is Ubhaya Vibhasha. Etesham Vishaye Purvam Praptaha Vidhi Vikalpyate. So that's Prapta Vibhasha. Anyesham Vishaye Purvam Apraptaha Vidhi Tatra Vidhiyate. So that's a Aprapta Vibhasha. So combining it is a Ubhaya Vibhasha. Similarly, Yasonupasargat Sanyasascha, you have already studied these particular sutras in class number 17 or in the Sarvadhatuka Khanda. Shnu Pratyaya Vishesha Vidhanam Shruvaha Shrucha Shru iti dhatoho Shru iti Bhadiganasya dhatu asti Shravane Tasya Shru iti Adeshaha Bhavati Tatra cha Punaha Shnu iti Vikarana Pratyaya Vidhiyate. A very complex question, probably unanswered question, is why Shru is in the Bhadigana if it gets a Shnu Vikarana Pratyaya. There have been certain Pakshas presented in various books. So for example, people say that Bhadigana Samarthyat Tatra Shapratye Krutyapi Vedeshu Rupam Bhavati. Nagesha has a different opinion. He brings in Yangluk in that particular discussion and says for Yangluk, it behaves not as a Shnu Pratyanta but as a Shap Pratyanta and so on. But there is no unanimous answer on why Shru Dhatu is in Bhadigana and not directly put in the Svadigana, because it anyway takes a Shnu compulsory Vikarana Pratyaya. Akshonyatarasyaam Tanukarane Takshaha Tatrapi Aksha Taksha Etesham Etayoho Vishaye Shap Vikaranam Vikalpena Badhitva Shnu iti Pratyaya Bhavati. Tadanantaram U iti Ashtamaganasya Vikarana Pratyaya Shnu Shna Etesham Sarvesham Vishesha Rupena Vidhanam. So Dhinvikrunavyoracha Stambhus Tumbhus Kambhus Kumbhus Kuibhyashtuscha. So I'm running because this has already been taught and almost all of you are expected to know this. This class is basically for bringing those things on the surface. That oh, these sutras we have learned, it's time to revise them. So Dhinvikrunavyoracha Dhivi and Kruvi dhatus Etesham Vishaye Shap Pratyam Badhitva U Pratyaya Bhavati. Stambhus Tumbhu, all these are Sautra dhatus Etesham Vishaye Shna iti Pratyaya Bhavati. Pakshe Shnu iti Pratyaya Bhavati. So some minor exceptions, so 7 or 8 exceptions are there, and that's where the application of Vikarana Pratyaya gets completed. Now starts the more interesting part. Tatra Vikarana Pratyasya Yojanadhanantaram Tatra Angakarya Sambandhi Vidhi. So this sheet got updated, or I updated it recently. Earlier it used to say Angakaryam, but Angakaryam is a kind of misleading word because under this title of Angakaryam, we are doing bunch of things in all previous classes. We were talking about Antaranga Vidhis, Nitya Vidhis, Atidesha, Dvitvam, Samprasaranam, and so on. So Tatra Angakarya Badhakaha, Angakarya Sambandhi Vidhi, iti eva Tatra Samanya Rupena Asya Nama Dadmaha. So Tatra Prathamam Asti Angakarya Badhakaha Antaranga Vidhi. So that's the Tugagama, Checha, and Dirghat. For almost every prakriya we have dealt with that. So Checha Tatha Dirghat Ityatra Etayoho Vishe Etayoho Sutrayoho Prayogaha Atra Udaharana Rupena Darshita Asti Rasveswarasya Chepare Tugagamaha Syat Dirghat Chepare Tuk Syat, and so on. So that's Antaranga Karya. It has to be done all the way in the beginning. Tadanantaram Atideshaha Asti Kinchit Vistarena Pathamaha Sarvadhatukam Apita. So the fourth sutra in the Atidesha Prakaranam apit sarvadhatukam nitvat syat. Any sarvadhatuka pratyay which is not a pit pratyay, doesn't have a pakara itsamnyaka in it, it behaves as if it is nitvat. All the properties of what being a nit pratyaya are imparted on this. This is an atidesha, are imparted on this pratyaya. What it means to be a nit pratyaya, everything that we have studied till now that is associated with a nit pratyaya, which includes iti cha iti guna nishedhaha. So nruta plus syana plus shatru, shana iti pratyayah sarvadhatuka samnyakah asti, apit asti, अतः अस्य विषये पुगन्तलघुपदस्य इत्यतेन अस्य उपस्थितौ पुगन्तलघुपदस्य चैतन्येन ऋकारस्य प्राप्तः गुणः निषिध्यते किङिति च इति तत्र सूत्रम्. Similarly, sarvadhatukarthadhatukayo can be blocked. You have shru iti dhatuhu, shnu iti vikarana pratyah. So shru iti repha plus u iti bhavet. Tadanantaram tasya shru iti parivartanam bhavati. Shru plus shnu tatra rukara ukarayoh shnu ityasya ukarah shatru pratyayah sarvadhatuka apit asti अतः तत्र प्रतिषिध्यते. श्रु इत्यस्य ऋकारस्य गुणः श्नु इत्यस्य शकारः इत्यत्र शकारः अस्ति. अयं प्रत्ययः सार्वधातुकः अपित् अस्ति अतः सार्वधातुकम् अपित् इत्यनेन नित्वत् भवति. अतः किं इति चेति तत्र निषिध्यते. So again, guna and vruddhi being blocked because the pratyay is kit or nit, nothing new in it. Pracha ityatra samprasaranam bhavati. So grahijya vaivyadi mrijjatina niti cha. So this particular niti cha tells that in presence of a nit pratyay, these will have samprasaranam. The previous sutra is only for kita. Understand this. Vachiswapi ajadinam kiti. That is only for kita. These pratyayas are not becoming kita. They are only becoming nita. So we cannot apply samprasaranam by the previous sutram. We can only apply the samprasaranam for the next sutram, which is grahijyavai. So grahijyavai iti sutrena agre pashyamah. There is a step on samprasaranam. Anena sutrena tatra samprasaranam bhavati. So pracha plus sha ityatra prucha iti samprasarena siddhyati. अनिदितां हलोपधायाः किङ इति इत्यनेन तत्र किङ इति अस्ति अतः उपधा नकार लोपः जायते. द्विष प्लस शत्रु इत्यत्र पुनरेकवारं विकरण प्रत्यय नास्ति, साक्षात् शत्रु प्रत्ययाग्रे आगच्छति अतः पुगन्त लघुपदस्य चित्तेन प्राप्तः उपधा गुणः निषिध्यते. So basically 3 to 4 important karyas. There is a guna vruddhi nishedha, there is upadha nakara lopa, there is samprasaranam. So these 3 or 4 karyas, and there will be a bunch of them. We can actually see 5-10 different individual karyas we are going to see in today's and tomorrow's class. So all these happen because these particular pratyayas are nitvat, they behave like nita. Now who exactly does not behave like a nita? Shapa iti pratyayah तत्र सार्वधातुकः अस्ति परन्तु पित्त अस्ति अतः शप प्रत्ययः नित्वत् न भवति. So whatever we saw the example for shana, shnu, sh, shna, shatru. Similar example will be there for shana ch. But you cannot have these examples for shapa. Ayam pitta pratyaya asti, sarvadhatukah asti, atah nitvat nasti. Tanadigणस्य विकरण प्रत्ययः उ इति प्रत्ययः सार्वधातुकः एव नास्ति. So then we don't have to worry about this. This is the only ardhadhatuka vikarana pratyaya. So again it is not nitvat. And then shnama iti pratyayah asti saptamaganasya rudhadiganasya vikarana pratyayah. So shnama pratyaya yadyapi sarvadhatukah asti तथापि तस्य विषये एतेषां सर्वेषां कानिपि उदाहरणानि न विद्यन्ते. किमर्थं न विद्यन्ते? श्नम इति विकरण प्रत्ययः अन्त्यात् अचः परः अन्त्यवर्णात् पूर्वम् आगच्छति. अन्त्यात् अचः परः. So रुद्ध इति अस्ति चेत् रुन्ध इति तत्र जायते. So anyway, there is no scope for puganta laghupadasya cha. There is no laghu varna in the upadha. There is no swara at the end. So sarvadhatuka ardhadhatuka cannot be applied. None of the other karyas also have any prasakti over there. So shnam ityatra shakarha kimartham asti. We have studied this all the way in some 17th or 18th class. Tatra shnan nalopaha ityatra shna iti vishesha rupena स्थापयितुं तत्र शकारः स्थाप्यते. नो चेत् नान्नलोपः इति क्रियते चेत् नकारादि प्रत्ययस्य विषये अपि तस्य सूत्रस्य प्रसक्तिः स्यात्. So again we have studied that earlier. So सामान्य रूपेण अत्र सार्वधातुकम् अपित् इत्यनेन अपित् सार्वधातुक प्रत्ययः नित्वत् भवति. We are not doing any karyas over here. अत्र केवलं नित् भवति इति ज्ञानम् अस्माभिः प्राप्यते. अस्य प्रयोगः तु अग्रे एव भवति. So at this particular step all that we say is we make proper circuit in the brain and say this is the nit pratyay. Keep that in mind for the karya that will happen later on. The next step over here is dvitva karya. So we are done with antaranga vidhi. There is no nitya vidhi. We are done with atidesha. The next step is dvitva over here. So I recently had a discussion with one of our attendees on the relative sequence between Samprasaranam and Dvitvam. So should you do Samprasaranam first or should you do Dvitvam first? So there are some very interesting questions that they asked. I will talk about these in the upcoming homework discussion. In the homework discussion this weekend, we are going to discuss the prakriya for the Kwasu, various dhatus. So there, Samprasaranam prarambhe karniyam va Dvitvam prarambhe karniyam. तत्र संप्रसारणं तथा तदाश्रितं कार्यं बलवत् भवति इति काचित् परिभाषा अस्ति। सा परिभाषा भाष्यकारेण कथं प्रत्याख्यायते एतत् सर्वं तस्मिन् वर्गे पश्यामः। For now, all that we want to understand is Dvitva Karya and Samprasarana Karya are two independent karyas in this particular context. Dvitva Karya is going to happen for the dhatus of the Juhotyadi Gana. Samprasaranam will happen for verbs which are there in Grahijya, Vaivyadhi and so on. अतः एतयोः मध्ये अत्र अस्यां प्रक्रियायां कोऽपि सम्बन्धः नास्ति. Dvitva is happening at a completely different place. Samprasaranam is happening. I mean, in a prakriya where Dvitva happens, there will not be Samprasaranam. In a prakriya where Samprasaranam happens, there will not be Dvitva. Specifically for this particular discussion. अतः केनापि क्रमेण अत्र अस्य लेखनं क्रियते चेदपि न दोषाय. So the next step is Dvitva Karya, which we will see a little bit in details. श्लौ इति तत्र सूत्रं सर्वैः प्रायः ज्ञायते. श्लौ परतः अनभ्यासस्य धातोः अवयवस्य प्रथमस्य एकाचः द्वितीयस्य वा यथा योग्यं द्वे भवतः. So in presence of the shap pratyaya, when it undergoes a shlu, so juhotyadibhyah shluh इत्यनेन shap विकरण प्रत्ययस्य श्लुः भवति. श्लुः इत्युक्ते लोपस्य कश्चन भेदः, लोपस्य कश्चन विशेष प्रकारः. तत्र श्लुः भवति इति विशेषरूपेण श्लुः किमर्थम् उच्यते? तर्हि श्लौ इत्यनेन तत्र द्वित्वं भवति. So all these are the dhatus of Juhotyadi Gana. That's all where the Dvitva happens. So these are all the dhatus of Juhotyadi Gana presented on the screen. Very few of them. Tatra Neelavarnena Darshitaha Dhatavaha Sarke Laukika Sarve Laukikaha Santi. Laukikaha means they're used in the lokas as well as you can find them in the Vedas. Not just Laukika. Laukika means Laukika plus Chandasa. And अन्ये सर्वे ग्रे कलर मध्ये सन्ति, ते सर्वे छान्दसाः धातवः सन्ति. So you can see half of the dhatus of Juhotyadi Gana are actually Chandasa dhatus. You don't see their usage in the loka. Rest of them are Laukika dhatus. But sarvatra kim bhavati? Dvitvam bhavati. Ekach prathamah, ekach avayavah. All these are ekach dhatus. They have only one ach letter. And therefore tatra ajadir dvitiyasya iti sutrasya prasaktihi nasti. Dhator प्रथमः एकाचः अवयवः तस्यैव अत्र द्वित्वं भवति. So who becomes who, bhi becomes bhi, ri becomes ri, pru becomes pru, and so on. Jana becomes jana, ga becomes ga. So you basically take the dhatu and replicate it. That's called dvitva. There is no what you can say the old one and the new one. I have already discussed this earlier. It's just one copy being replaced by two copies. The first of them will be called abhyasa. Both of them will be called abhyasta. We will talk about these in upcoming slides. So tatra etadrisham prarambhe dvitvam kriyate tadanantaram dvitva vishishtam karyam api asmabhi karaniyam tata dvitva vishishta karyasya vishaye kanichana sutrani kramena pashyamah purvam api asmabhi etani drishtani. So when I was talking about lit lakar, I have explained this. When I was talking about ach pratyaya विषये कुत्रचित् द्वित्वं भवति तस्मिन् विषये अपि एतत् सर्वं मया उक्तमासीत्. पुनरेकवारं पश्यामः. जुहोत्यादिगणस्य आधारेण इदानीं पश्यामः. तत्र urrata iti prathamam sutram. So 8 or 9 sutras are there in the abhyasa karyas. Urrata iti sutram. Abhyasasya ru varnah asti tasya akara adeshah bhavati. So if you go to the previous table, there are multiple dhatus with a rukar. So you have a gru over here, you have a pru over here, you have a ru over here, and so on. So abhyasasya ru varnah asti tasya akara adeshah bhavati. Ru becomes a, immediately uran rapara will come in. It will be ghar. So gru, ghar, gru, par, pru, and so on. Tadanantaram kuhoschuhu abhyasasya kavargiya varnasya hakarasya cha antartamaha cha vargadeshah bhavati. So ga will become ja, gha will become jha, ha will again become jha, samvaranada ghosha mahaprana, and so on. Haladisheshaha, visarga is missing. Haladisheshaha. Abhyasasya adihi halchishate anye lupyante. So ri will become he, jhar will become jha, nija will become ni, and so on. Hrasvaha abhyasasya hraswaha bhavati, da, da, so da will become the, he will become he, and so on. Agre asti nija. There is a question on the previous slide. I think this was a question asked earlier also. Why is the order of the sutras reversed? So I don't think there is a reason to reverse an order. Basically, we'll apply Parasutra first and then Purva Sutram, and therefore the order is typically reversed, because anytime you have a conflict, you can apply the Parasutram. But again, you have to take all that with a pinch of salt, because then Abhyasa Vikareshu Badhya Badhava Bhavo Nasti, and so on. A lot of things come over here. So I think this table was there in one of the previous presentations, and I just copy pasted it over here. And same question was asked to me at that time, and same answer was given by me at that time. Basically, sutras have been presented. This order does not necessarily reflect the order in which the sutras have to be applied. Usually, we apply the sutras from Para to Purva, so that's how it is being written over here. Agre Gachama. Now here the order is reversed because they are all sequential. 56, 50, 75, 76, 77, 78. So again, I just put them in the order. So these basically 4 sutras, they are actually specific to examples of Juhotyadi Gana. Pashyamaha nijam trayanam gunaha shlau. So yatra shap pratyasya shluhu bhavati tatra kasyachana dhatoho keshanchana dhatunam gunaha bhavati. If you go to the previous slide, nijam trayanam, exactly these 3 on the 3rd row. Nija dhatu, vija dhatu, visha dhatu. किं भवति गुणः भवति कस्य गुणः भवति तत्र इक्वर्णस्य गुणः भवति so you have nija plus nija this ni is going to become ni obviously haladi shesha will get rid of ja e will become a vija vija vivija v will become ve visha visha again this v will become ve so that's nijam trayanam gunaha shlau nija vija visha इत्येतेषाम् अभ्यासस्य गुणः भवति ni becomes ne similarly v becomes ve in both other examples अग्रिमं सूत्रमस्ति भ्रूयाम it so tatrapi trayah dhatavah so these are also 3 dhatus nija vija and visha if you go to that particular list of dhatus bhruyam itah is also same in this is 3 dhatus same number immediately above them. So nija, vija, visha, immediately above then you can see this bhru is there, ma is there, and ha is there. So for these 3 dhatus, the next sutram is applicable. Bhru, ma, tatha ha. Etesham abhyasasya ikaradesha bhavati. Bhruyam it iti atra sutram. So bhru ityatra pashyamaha. Prathamam bhru ityasya bhara iti bhavati. First of all, you apply the previous sutra urat to get an a. Urandraparaha will bring a ra. So bhara, haladisheshaha will get rid of ra. You have bha and then ikaradesha bhavati. So etesham abhyasasya ikaradesha bhavati. Ma ityatra ma iti bhavati. Tasya ikaradesha bhavati. Ha ityatra gha ityasya gha. Tasya hraswadesha ikaradesha bhavati. So atra etesham sarvesham vishaye abhyasasya ikaradesha bhavati. Agrimam sutram arti pipartyoscha. So ru dhatu and pru dhatu. If you look at the table, ru dhatu is over here and this pru dhatu is over here. So etayoho vishaye arti pipartyoscha ityanena abhyasasya ikaradesha bhavati. So ru, again ru has become a. Urandrapara will bring a ra will go away, it will become e. Pru, para, pa, pi. So artipipartyosha ityanena prathamam purvam uktam samanyam karyam krutva tadanantaram etat karyam karaniyam. So you can see this order is actually being disturbed. You don't apply artipipartyosha directly because it is a parasutram. We'll not go in the details of those aspects right now, but you follow the steps that are given over here. Basically, you try to follow the steps on the previous slide because these are the general steps. We'll follow them first and we will basically then do apavadas. So that's what I was earlier mentioning, that in case of abhyasa karyas, there is no badhya badhaka bhava. Abhyasa vikareshu badhya badhaka bhavo nasti. You don't have an apavada blocking the utsarga in the abhyasa karyas. But that's a completely different discussion. Let's not go into that shastra. So here pru ityasya pa tadanantaram pi iti bhavati arti pipartyosha iti atra sutram. And then the last sutram bahulam chandasi ityatra vedeshu kevalam vedeshu chandasi iti asti vedeshu अभ्यासस्य बहुलम इकारादेशः भवति. Even if none of the previous conditions are satisfied, the bruyam, ita or artipi pratyoscha, you can still have abhyasa getting converted to ikara only in the Vedas. So for example, ga iti dhatu asti, dvitvam, hrasvaha, tatra kutvam bhavati, no, chutvam, kuhoshu iti chutvam bhavati, tadanantaram hrasvaha bhavat. I think this step might not be needed. So hrasvaha bhavati, tasya ikara desha bhavati. Similarly over here, sru, sara, sa, tasya ikara desha bhavati. Anena prakarena kutrachit vedeshu abhyasasya ikaradeshah bhavitum arhati. So these are some 8 sutras, 4 on the previous slide, 4 on this slide. These basically talk about the abhyasa karyas, the karya that is specific to abhyasa. It is going to happen only in case of a handful of dhatus of, or all dhatus of Juhotyadi Gana. Why I said handful? Because these are the only ones that really matter for you. Like half of the Juhotyadi Gana is Vaidika specific, Chandasa specific. So only the first half really matters for you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 dhatus of Juhotyadi Gana. Etesham Vishaye etadrisham karyam asmabhihi samyak rupena jnatavyam. So this is specifically about Abhyasa Karyam. That was the third step. The fourth step over here in the flowchart is Samprasaranam. So we finished with this Dvitvam and Dvitva Karyam. The next step over here is Samprasaranam. Kinchit Punaravartanam Igyana Samprasaranam iti sutram Yanaha Ik Bhavati. Yan Varnasya Sthane Vidhiyamanaha Ik Varnaha Tathacha Iyam Prakriya Ubhayoho Samprasarana Samnya Bhavati. Now this ik is a vidhiyamanaha ik, and therefore avdisavarnasya cha pratyayityanena kevalam hrasva swaraha eva adesha rupena agacchati, dirgha swaraha na agacchati. Samprasarane krute punaha yanadesha sa prasaktihi asti. All your efforts will be useless. So in order to block that, we have samprasaranacha. And when you have 2 consecutive letters where the samprasarana can happen, for example, vye iti asti, tatra prathamam agrima varnasya samprasaranam karaniyam. किमर्थं न संप्रसारणे संप्रसारणमिति तत्र ज्ञापकं संप्रसारणे वर्णे परे पूर्ववर्णस्य संप्रसारणं न भवति. So understand, I have mentioned this earlier, let me repeat. This sutra does not directly tell you kasya samprasaranam karaniyam. So if you have a dhatu like vye, yatra vakarasya api samprasaranam bhavitum arhati, yakarasya api samprasaranam bhavitum arhati, tatra kasya prathamam samprasaranam karaniyam, no chet kasya samprasaranam karaniyam versus kasya na karaniyam. इत्यस्य उत्तरं डायरेक्ट अनेन सूत्रेण न लभ्यते. All that this sutra says is samprasarane varne pare purvavarnasya samprasaranam na bhavati. So if you have a samprasaranam varna in front, the previous one cannot undergo a samprasaranam. Now in order for this sutra to be effective, the common sense tells us that we have to first do the samprasaranam on the right side and then we block the samprasaranam on the left side, the one before that. अतः संप्रसारण सम्यके वर्णे परे पूर्ववर्णस्य संप्रसारणं न भवति. अतः यत्र द्वयोः वर्णयोः संप्रसारणं भवितुमर्हति तत्र अनन्तरं विद्यमानस्य वर्णस्य प्रथमं संप्रसारणं करणीयं. सो व्ये इत्यत्र यकारस्य इ इति भवति, संप्रसारणाच्च इति एकादेशः. तदनन्तरं व प्लस् इ इत्यत्र वकारस्य संप्रसारणम् अग्रे संप्रसारणसम्यकवर्णः अस्ति, अतः निषिध्यते. उदाहरणं पश्यामः. सो एज आई मेंशन्ड अर्लियर, तत्र संप्रसारणस्य प्रामुख्येन सूत्रद्वयं वचिस्वपि यजातीनां किति अस्य सूत्रस्य अत्र प्रयोगः न भवति. ग्रहिज्या वै व्यधि वष्टि विचति वृच्छति पृच्छति भृजतीनां निति च. सो दिस च ब्रिंग्स किति फ्रॉम द प्रीवियस सूत्रम. सो एतेषां विषये किं भवति, कित् प्रत्यये परे संप्रसारणं भवति, नित् प्रत्यये परे अपि संप्रसारणं भवति. But you don't really care about kit pratyas right now. Atra nit pratyayah asti, sakshat tu nasti, parantu atideshena tatra nitvat bhavah vidhiyate, atah grihijya vaityanena atra samprasaranam bhavitum arhati. So all the examples are presented over here. Graha iti asti, tasya griha iti bhavati, ja ityasya ji iti bhavati. So this ji will further get converted to dirgha. Halaha will come over here. It will become dirgha, and then again twadinam hrasvaha will make it hrasva. I will talk about it, I think, directly on the next slide. So you have vyadha will become vidha, vasha will become usha, vyacha will become vicha, and so on. So you can take a look at this. Let me repeat. वचिस्वपि यजादीनां किति अस्य सूत्रस्य प्रयोगः न भवति. For example, यज will become यजते or यजत or यजमान properly, and it will not have samprasaranam in this particular context. Yajati, I think so. Yajat. So samprasarane krute halaha iti dirghaha. So angavayavad halaha param samprasaranam tadattasya angasya dirghaha syat. Look at this prakriya ja tatra samprasaranam bhavati yakarasya ikarah ji grahijya iti samprasaranam samprasanachya iti ekadeshah. Okay. Tadanantaram atra halaha iti dirghadeshah bhavati. So G becomes G. That's halaha. Why? Because this samprasarana samyak varna is at the end. It is after the hal letter and it is generated because of samprasaranam. So it becomes dirgha. Then you have a further more steps. We'll talk about this later today. Anantaram twadinam hraswaha iti sutrena tatra G ityasya punar hraswadesha bhavati. We'll again see this sutra. All the new sutras we will see. The sutras that we've already covered in the class, I'm kind of rushing through them. So jinat iti atra antimam rupam siddhati. So this is basically the the prelude or the initial state of steps. Now the real material in the Shatru and Shanach Prakriya starts. The Pratyay Vishishtam or Vikarana Vishishtam, or you can say Pratyay Samanyam versus Pratyay Vishishtam Angakaryam. So basically, if you remember the Nishtha Prakriya, let me just quickly compare the Nishtha Prakriya with this. In Nishtha Prakriya, there was a complexity that was across various steps. Tatra idagamasya vishe bahuni sutrani. Tadantram tripadyam nishtatakarasya adeshasya vishe bahuni sutrani. Even in samprasaranam, we had some 10-12 sutras. There's some 15 odd sutras in Angakaryas and so on. Contrast that with this Shatru and Shanach Prakriya, where except for that initial dvitva, which is spanning only the dhatus of Juhotyadi-gana, most of the complexity lies in the Angakarya. The step of Angakarya is undoubtedly the most complex step in the entire Prakriya of Shatru Shanacha. And if you do not believe me, this is the proof. This is the vast list of karyas. So you will have Anaimittikam Angakaryam. You have Sarvadhatuka Pratyaya Vishishtam Angakaryam. There is an Angakarya that requires a Sarvadhatuka Pratyaya. That's it. Then there is a Karya that requires Sarvadhatuka Pitta Pratyaya. Then there is a Karya that will require Sarvadhatuka Nit Pratyaya. Then there is a Karya that will require, because Sarvadhatuka Pitta will be applicable for Shapa. Sarvadhatuka Nit will be applicable for Shan or Shnu or other such Nit Pratyayas. Even the bare Shatru and Shanach. Then there is a general Knit Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam. So they don't care whether it is Sarvadhatuka or Ardhadhatuka, but they just care it is Knit Pratyaya. Tatra Guna Vruddhi Nishedha iti asya udaharanam. Yatha Kniti Chaitanyena Guna Vruddhi Nishedha bhavati. Tatra Sarvadhatuka Pratyaya syat, uta Ardhadhatuka Pratyaya syat. Tatra Guna Nishedha avashyam bhavati. Guna Vruddhi Nishedhe jayamanam karyam. Shit Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam. So all that it cares is there is a Shakara in it. Shit Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam. Understand the difference. Sarvadhatuka Pratyaya Vishishta Karyam and Shit Pratyaya Vishishta Karyam is different because Sarvadhatuka Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam can also be applied to non-Shit Sarvadhatuka Pratyayas. Ting Shit Sarvadhatukam iti tatra sutram. So Ting Pratyayas are also Sarvadhatuka Samnika Pratyayas. So Sarvadhatuka Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam iti bhinnam, Shit Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam iti bhinnam. Tatra Ajadi Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam. So Shatru and Shanaj both are Ajadi Pratyayas. You can have, or even Shapa is an Ajadi Pratyaya. You can have Karya specific to Ajadi Pratyayas. So all these Karyas starting from Anaimittikam Angakaryam up to this Ajadi Pratyaya Pare Karyam, all these initial bunch of Karyas is Pratyaya Samanyam Angakaryam. Tatra etesham sarvesham sutranam vyakhyayam vishishtaha eva pratyayaha bhavet iti tatra avashyakata nasti. So they don't tell that it should be Shatru or it should be Shanach or it should be say Shapa or anything like that. These are general karyas. Pratyaya Samanya Karyam. Any pratyaya that satisfies a given criteria can fit over here. So for example, here any Kit or Nit pratyaya is acceptable. It may be Shatru pratyaya, Shanach pratyaya or any other pratyaya. Similarly here, any Sarvadhatuka pratyaya fits in that particular class. So ityatra sarvatra etesham sarvesham karyanam prayogartham tatra pratyasya kashchana visheshah gunaha eva avashyakah nahi vishishta pratyayah. Contrary to that, the second set of second set of karyas are specific to individual pratyayas. So shanach pratyay vishishtam karyam asti. It has to happen only when there is shanach pratyaya. Shatru pratyay vishishtam karyam asti. Shap pratyay vishishtam karyam asti. Shana pratyay vishishtam karyam asti. Sha pratyay vishishtam karyam asti. Agre shnam pratyay vishishtam karyam asti. So all these are pratyaya vishishta karyas, and this is the reason why the anga karya is a crux of all this prakriya. You have to think about general karyas, plus you have to think about karyas specific to individual pratyayas. A total of more than 35 different karyas we are going to study in this entire section. That is the crux, or that is the major part of today's and tomorrow's discussion. The anga karya sambandhi vidhi, the last part, avashishtam anga karyam. That's what we are starting right now. After that, there will be no uttar padadhikara karyam. Varna karyam is just the normal sandhis. You all know that. Tripadi karyam, again, it's exactly the same karyas that we have been studying again and again throughout this course. So we just will have two last slides in tomorrow's class on the Varna karyam and Tripadi karyam. But whatever 40-45 minutes we have today, that part and almost the entire class for tomorrow, we will discuss these particular karyas, starting from this anaimittikam anga karyam up to shnam pratyay vishishtam karyam. In this particular set, we will also discuss some shastra aspects specifically associated with the Mugagama. So ani mukha iti sutrasya vishaye kashchana mahan shastra vistarah tatra grantheshu drishyate tasya vishishta rupena shwastana varge adhyanam kurmah. So the goal for today's class, so somebody is saying tatra sha pa tatha nga ityetesham pratyekam pratyayam svikritya tatra karyam karniyam. That's samyak asti. So sha, pa and nga are the three most crucial particles in Paninian grammar. Sha asti chet shit pratyay vishishtam karyam, pa asti chet pit pratyay vishishtam karyam, nga asti chet nit pratyay vishishtam karyam, and you have all those things appearing in this particular context. That is the reason of this complexity. You have various karyas attributed to sha, there are karyas that are attributed to pa, there are karyas that are attributed to nga, and then there are karyas attributed to the fact that it is an ajadi pratyaya. So, Adyatana Varge Kim Kurmaha, we will start with this. My goal is to finish till this point. Guna Vruddhi Nishedhe Jayamanam Karyam. So, first 6 steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 6 steps I want to finish till today. Hopefully, let's see how the time is available. Shwastana Varge Shit Pratyay Pare Ityasma Agre Pathamaha. So, let's start. I also have the same slide in a different deck, or in the same deck, it's copied over here. I've just kept this slide in a separate tab so that we can continuously refer to this particular slide and understand where we are. So tatra prarambhe anaimittikam angakaryam iti tatra pathamaha. So anaimittikam angakaryam, the only one sutra most of you are aware, or all of you are expected to know this. Upadhayascha ityatra krita dhatoho vishaye tatra kimapi nimittam napekshate. But there is a small reason associated with lung lakara why this karya should be given in the anga karya only. So let's get it out of the way. Upadhayasha ityanena kruta iti dhatoho upadha bhutasya dirgha rukarasya, typing mistake, dirgha rukarasya ikaradesha bhavati kruta ityatra kirta. There is an optional nich for this particular dhatu. Tatra nich pratyah kriyate chet kirtayat, nich pratyah na kriyate chet kirtata. So this kirta plus ata, there is no direct addition. Tatra shapa agachati, kirta plus ata, ato gune iti bhavati, kirtata iti addimam rupam siddhyati. Ubhayatra ubadhayancha iti ikarasya dirghadesha bhavati. Etat sarvam purvam patitamasti. So that completes step number 1. So that completes anaimittikam anga karyam. Let's go to step number 2, sarvadhatuka pratyay vishishtam karyam. Again, only one sutram over here, specific to one dhatu out of all 2000 dhatus. Shingaha sarvadhatuke gunaha. Pashyamaha. Purvam na drishtam ataha kinchit vistarena pashyamaha. Shing iti adadi ganasya dhatu. Shing swapne atmanepadi dhatu asti. Nit asti anudatmanyitatmane padam. So shing iti dhatu. Shingaha angasya sarvadhatuke parataha gunaha bhavati. Understand this particular point. Sarvadhatuke pratyay pare sarvesham dhatunam angasya ikaha gunaha bhavati. So there is nothing new he is telling us. Sarvadhatuka ardhadhatuka yutyanena sarvatra sarvadhatuka pratyay asti chet angasya gunaha avashyam bhavati. परन्तु सः गुणः सार्वधातुकार्धधातुक इत्यनेन उक्तः गुणः किङिति च इत्यनेन प्रतिषिध्यते तद् बाधित्वा अत्र पुनः अत्र अयं गुणः उच्यते सो किङिति च इत्यस्य अपवादः शीङ् इति धातुः अस्ति चेत् तत्र इकारस्य सार्वधातुके प्रत्यये परे अवश्यं गुणः भवति तत्र कित् प्रत्ययः भवेत् ङित् प्रत्ययः भवेत् नो चेत् अन्य कोऽपि प्रत्ययः भवेत् गुणः तु करणीयः एव तो शीङः अङ्गस्य सार्वधातुके परतः गुणः भवति शीङ् प्लस् शान च. Now understand this, I am writing the prakriya directly starting with shanacha here and many other slides, but you should always remember to start the prakriya with lat. So you have to start with vartamane lat and then lat will become shatru or lat will become shanacha. The only exceptions are those 4-5 sutras, indharyo, shatrakrachini, dvisho, mitre and so on. Tatra dhatoho sakshat shatru pratyaya bhavitum arhati. So if your krud vritti is about dvisho mitre, you are allowed to say dvisha or you are expected to say dvisha plus shatru directly without going through letter. But if your vritti is anything else, which is basically talking about lata shatru shana chava prathama smanadikarane, tarhi tatra lat ityasmat prarambham krutva tadanantaram eva shatru tatha shanach adesho karaniyau. So purely for sake of simplicity or omitting unnecessary steps, on many slides going ahead, I will be omitting letter, but you have to start the prakriya with letter. So shinga plus shanacha becomes ana. At this particular point, shanacha iti sarvadhatuka pratyaya यद्यपि अयं प्रत्ययः ङित्वत् अस्ति तथापि किङिति च इत्यस्य अपवादरूपेण शिङ् सार्वधातुके गुणः इत्यनेन अवश्यं गुणः भवति शी बिकम्स शे शयान इति अत्र रूपं सिद्ध्यति सो शयान इति अत्र we have seen this in lakshana हेतवोः क्रियायाः तत्र शयानाः खादन्ति यवनाः इत्यस्मिन् उदाहरणे अयं शब्दः अस्माभिः दृष्टः शयान इति अत्र शब्दः सिद्ध्यति. Now look at this. You last time I told that you take prathama purusha द्विवचन form when it comes to shanach pratyaya. तत्र प्रथम पुरुष द्विवचनस्य रूपं स्वीकृत्य तत्र ते इत्यस्य स्थाने आन न ते इत्यस्य स्थाने न और आते इत्यस्य स्थाने आन इति स्थापयामश्चेत् शयान इति सिद्ध्यति. So that's a small trick to remember it. Prakriya is going to be identical. That's why we can come up with such a trick. परन्तु इयम् अत्र प्रक्रिया अस्ति शिङः सार्वधातुके गुणः इति सार्वधातुक प्रत्ययविशिष्टं कार्यम्. अग्रे अस्ति सार्वधातुक पित् प्रत्ययविशिष्टं कार्यं. So step number 3 is here सार्वधातुक पित् प्रत्ययविशिष्टं कार्यं. So many of you will not or most of us will usually forget this, but सार्वधातुकार्धधातुकयोः and पुगन्तलघुपदस्य च एते द्वे सूत्रे सार्वधातुक पित् विशिष्ट कार्यम् एव वदतः. तत्र यद्यपि सूत्रे सार्वधातुकार्धधातुके युक्तमस्ति तथापि किङिति च इत्यनेन ङित् प्रत्ययस्य विषये एतयोः सूत्रयोः बाधनं क्रियते. एतयोः सूत्रयोः यः गुणः सिद्ध्यति तस्य बाधनं क्रियते. अतः अत्र सार्वधातुक पित् प्रत्यये परे एव अस्य प्रसक्तिः अस्ति. So सार्वधातुकार्धधातुकयोः भू प्लस शत्रु भू प्लस शप. So it is a pit pratyaya and therefore you can have bho. Similarly, vrudha plus shanacha, vrudha plus shap plus shanacha, pit pratyaya asti. Atah you can have a guna vardhamana iti rupam siddhati. On previous slide there is a question. Shing ityasya ardhadhatuke gunaha bhavati va na bhavati? Of course na bhavati. That is the reason why he would say shingaha sarvadhatuke gunaha. So अत्र सार्वधातुके इति किं निशिष्ये इति अत्र आर्धधातुक प्रत्ययं लिट् लकारं स्वीकृत्य अत्र उदाहरणं दत्तमस्ति. अत्र गुणः न भवति. सो सार्वधातुके एव अत्र गुणः भवति. Let me come back to that particular statement. So शिङः आर्धधातुके गुणः भवति वा न भवति तत्र सार्वधातुकार्धधातुकयोः इत्यनेन तस्य गुणः अवश्यं भवितुम् अर्हति. परन्तु किङिति च इत्यत्र तस्य निषेधः क्रियते चेत् गुणः भवति वा न भवति तर्हि न भवति. शिङः सार्वधातुके गुणः. This particular sutram comes as an apavada for kiङiti च in the sarvadhatuka case. That is the essence over here. Agre gacchamaha. So the next one is sarvadhatuka ङित् प्रत्ययविशिष्टं कार्यं. So we did sarvadhatuka pit pratyayavishishtam karyam. Idanim sarvadhatuka ङित् pratyayavishishtam karyam. A bunch of them are there. Pashyamaha. अत उत् सार्वधातुके इति तत्र प्रथमं सूत्रं. So सार्वधातुक ङित् प्रत्ययविशिष्टं कार्यं. So we are dealing with sarvadhatuka pratyayas and we are dealing with ङित् of them which are nothing but shan pratyaya, or say sh pratyaya, or say shna pratyaya, even the bare minimum shatru pratyaya, shanat pratyaya are all sarvadhatuka, and because of the atidesha they have become nita. So atra sarvadhatuke nit pratyaya vishishtam karyamasti. So atta ut sarvadhatuke व्याख्यानं वदामि तस्मात् पूर्वमेतत् पश्यामः. स्पेसिफिकली रिलेटेड टू द क्रू धातु कृञीकरणे इत्यस्य विषये उकारान्तस्य अङ्गस्य शत्रुशानच् प्रत्ययः परतः आकारादेशः भवति. व्हाट आकारादेशः भवति? उकारादेशः भवति. सो उकारान्तस्य अङ्गस्य शत्रुशानच् प्रत्ययः परतः उकारादेशः भवति. सो इफ यू रिमेंबर दिस धातु फॉर्म्स ऑफ द क्रू धातु करोति, कुरुतः, कुर्वन्ति, करोषि, kurutha, kurutha. So the ku that comes in the dvivachana and bahuvachana forms is attributed to ata ut sarvadhatuke. So ata ut sarvadhatuke ukara pratyayantah kru dhatuh. So kru dhatuh asti tatra vikarana pratyayah u iti agacchati tanadibhya kru ityane tanadikrubhya u ityanena u iti vikarana pratyayah. So kru tatra ukara pratyaya agacchati. तत्र उकार प्रत्ययः आर्धधातुक प्रत्ययः अस्ति, सार्वधातुक आर्धधातुक इत्यनेन गुणे कृते कर इति भवति. So you have kara plus u, you have akara over there. That akara becomes ukara in presence of a sarvadhatuka nit pratyaya like shatru or shanach. So kru plus shatru, kru plus u tatra vikarana pratyaya agacchati, kru plus u plus ata, u iti ardhadhatuka pratyayah, sarvadhatuka ardhadhatuka iti gunah, kara plus u plus ata. At this particular stage, see, all the conditions have been satisfied. Ukara pratyayantah. So there is an ukara pratyayant anga, there is a kru dhatu, there is an akara present in the kru dhatu. Tasya sthane there is a sarvadhatuka kini pratyay, kit pratyay, mit pratyay in front, that's the shatru. Ataha atra asyam sthitau akarasya sthane ukaradeshah bhavati. Kur plus u plus at agre prakriyam krutva, see normally anadesha kurvat iti atra rupam siddhyati. Similarly kurvana iti shanach pratyay rupam siddhyati at ut sarvadhatuke iti atra sutram. अग्रे गच्छामः. सार्वधातुक ङित् प्रत्यय विशिष्टं द्वितीयं कार्यं श्वसोः श्नसोरल्लोपः. There is a question on the previous slide, let me take that. तत्र अव्यवहितः नास्ति. सत्यम्, अव्यवहितः नास्ति, परन्तु तत्र ककारोत्तरः अकारः अन्ते नैव आगन्तुं शक्नोति. So as soon as you are specifically talking about kru dhatu and you have a ru over there, urant rapara will anyway bring a ra. So anyway you cannot have akara at the end. So that much leniency or that much space is given. Yatra ante tadrshah varnah naiva bhavitum arhati. Tatra tasmat purvam varnah vidyate chedapi na doshaya. Exactly the same thing you will see right on this second example. Shnasorallopaha. We'll come to this question once again after talking about shnasorallopaha. Tatra shnasorallopaha. Shnam iti rudhadiganasya vikarana pratyayah. Asya pratyasya vishaye idam sutram. Shnasoho allopaha. Shnam and asa. Asa iti dhatuhu adadiganasya astistaha santi. So that asa dhatu and the shnam vikarana pratyaya. एतयोः विषये किं भवति? श्नम् इत्यस्य अकारस्य तथा च असधातोः अकारस्य सार्वधातुके ङिति प्रत्यये परे लोपः भवति. सो शत्रुशानच् प्रत्ययोः परतः लोपः भवति. So let's take the example of the shnam pratyay, that's the vikarana pratyay of saptamagana rudhadigana. So bhida iti asti, bhida plus shatru, tatra shnam iti vikarana pratyay agacchati. Now midachontyat paraha ittenena shnam iti pratyayah antyat achah paraha agacchati. So you have to write it bhi plus shnam plus the tatra itsamnyaka varnam nishkasya bhi plus na plus the full na asti. Shakarasya itsamnyalopa makarasya itsamnyalopah na full na iti avashishyate. Bhi na the plus at. Again the same problem as somebody mentioned over here. There is vyavadhana of dakara over here. So sarvadhatuke kiniti paratah ityukte avyavahita paratvam katham asti, kutra asti. So there is a sarvadhatuka pratyay in front, fair enough. There is a shnam pratyaya, fair enough, but there is a vyavadhana. Now the argument on the top of is that if you don't have a vyavadhana, then shnam pratyaya cannot come. By definition, shnam will come before the last letter. Therefore, one vyavadhana is acceptable. You cannot have more, and you cannot use this illegitimately to have whatever vyavadhanas you want. But the fact that tatra shnam pratyayah purvam vihita पूर्वमेव भवति अन्त्यात् वर्णात् पूर्वं नो चेत् स्वरात् अनन्तरमेव भवति इति ज्ञापकं यत् तत्र एकवर्णस्य व्यवधानम् अवश्यं भवितुम् अर्हति क्रियते च तदपि न दोषाय. Otherwise the sutra will become ineffective. It will not be useful at all. So भिन्न plus at तत्र नकारः तदनन्तरं यः अकारः अस्ति तस्य लोपः भवति. भिन्द प्लस अत भिन्दत इति रूपं सिद्ध्यति. अत्रापि सार्वधातुकः कित् प्रत्ययः ङित् प्रत्ययः अस्ति शत्रु तथा शानच्. अतः अस्य सूत्रस्य प्रयोगः भवितुम् अर्हति. अस इति धातुः अस प्लस शत्रु अस प्लस अत शप् इति विकरण प्रत्ययः तस्य लुक् भवति अधिप्रभृतिभ्यः शपः इत्यनेन. So अस प्लस अत at this particular point in time at इति सार्वधातुकः ङित् प्रत्ययः. Therefore अस इत्यस्य अकारस्य लोपः स इति अवशिष्यते सत् इति भवति. So अस्ति स्तः सन्ति, that सन्ति similar to that is this सत्. अतः अत्र श्नसोरल्लोपः इत्यनेन श्नम इति गणविकरणं नो चेत् अस् इति धातुः एतयोः अकारस्य सार्वधातुके ङिति प्रत्यये परतः लोपः भवति. Let me remind that all this will be dry theory if you do not work these things out. The most important rule of getting handle over prakriya is to actually work these out on a regular basis. Like even if you have studied this while studying Tinganta prakriya, it might be a good time to revise that quickly. You need not write all the steps, but like important steps. Somebody was saying yesterday that in an email that I was giving a question. There was a homework, the question on Kwasu Pratyaya. So I can do with one, I can do other stuff, but I forgot how to do Subanta Pratyaya, which was learned last year. So the only answer to that is continuous practice. Otherwise, you will learn the new things and you will forget the basic aspects of Sarvadhatuka Prakriya or Sumanta Prakriya. Absolutely not correct. So somebody is saying over here, avyavahita purvasya, it applies only if it is not specified. I don't understand over here, but typically when you say parasaptami, so for example you say sarvadhatuke kniti parataha, when you say parasaptami over here, it is always tasminiti nirdishte purvasya. So avyavahita paratva is actually guaranteed over there. And I think here in Shnasorallopa, we don't have time to go through the commentary, but here in Shnasorallopa, exactly the same question has been taken by some of the commentaries, and they have said that tatra avyavahita paratvam naiva vidyate and so on. So one of the commentaries or here or somewhere else, but they have exactly taken this particular question, and let's see if I can quickly find it over here. It's not here, but somewhere else same question has been taken and it has been explained. Okay, somebody is saying that because shna pratyaya has only one ach letter, therefore it may not have avyavahita paratva. I'm not familiar with this particular argument. Anyway, we'll keep that aside, but I should be able to, or you should be able to find this particular argument of avyavahita versus vyavahita. It has been discussed somewhere in the commentaries. Anyway, agre gacchamaha. Agrimam sutram shnabhyastayoratah looks somewhat similar to, it's also start with shnasora, shna. It's a different sutram. This particular shnasorallopaha is applicable for the shnama, which is the vikarana of 7th gana. Shnabhyastayoratah is for shna, which is the vikarana of 9th gana. So shnabhyastayoratah ityanena kim bhavati? Shna iti vikarana pratyaya asti, asya akarasya lopaha bhavati. Similarly, abhyastasya akarasya lopaha bhavati. What is abhyasta? When you do a dvitva, both of these particular entities are called abhyasta. So dvitve krute ubhe abhyastam ityanena dvayoho api avayoho abhyasta samnya bhavati. So dvayoho vishaye api idam sutram pravartate. Bhavati va iti pashyamaha, parantu tatra pravartate or tatra prapnoti iti vadamaha. Ataha asya sutrasya vishishtaha akara lopaha कुत्र कुत्र भवति? श्ना इति विकरण प्रत्यय अस्ति तस्य विषये भवति. नो चेत् अभ्यस्तानां विषये भवति। प्रक्रियां पश्यामः। सो नवमगणस्य क्री इति धातुः, क्री उभयपदी अस्ति, अतः शत्रु नो चेत् शान च, श्ना इति विकरणप्रत्ययः, श्ना इत्यत्र ना इति अवशिष्यते। अग्रे सार्वधातुकः ङित् प्रत्ययः अस्ति, अतः श्नाभ्यस्तयोः आतः इत्यनेन आकारस्य लोपः भवति। ना इत्यस्य न इति भवति, वर्णमेलनं कृत्वा क्रीणत नो चेत् क्रीणान इति सिद्ध्यति। So this is where simple. This is where shna ityasya akarasya lopah kritah drishyate. Let's take the second example of abhyasta. So duda iti juhotyadiganasya. As soon as you say abhyasta, you have to talk about juhotyadigana. So duda ityatra juhotyadiganasya dhatuh da iti, da plus shatru or shana cha dvitvam bhavati, abhyasa karyam bhavati, da plus da plus at. Now understand this. Who is abhyasta? Both of them are abhyasta. Da is also abhyasta, other da is also abhyasta. But only one of these abhyasta has an akara in it. Moreover, only one of these abhyasta is directly followed by the sarvadhatuka nit or nit pratyaya. So, अत्र यद्यपि उभयोः अभ्यस्त संज्ञा भवति, तथापि द्वितीयस्यैव विषये इदं सूत्रं प्रवर्तते. Not for first, for two reasons. Number one, there is no akara over here. It has already become akara by raswaha. And moreover, it is not directly followed by the sarvadhatuka nit pratyaya. So, da ityasya akarasya lopaha, da iti bhavati. So, shnabhyastayyorataha iti akara lopaha, da iti bhavati. The full the. This abhyasa remains as it is, full the. Then the next becomes half the plus ata, the or the dana iti atra rupam siddhyati. So shnabhyastayyoho atah इत्यनेन श्नाविकरण प्रत्ययस्य इदम् उदाहरणम्, अभ्यस्त संज्ञकानाम् इदम् उदाहरणम्. What is अभ्यस्त? Let me repeat this. द्वित्वे कृते उभे अभ्यस्तम् इत्यनेन द्वयोः अपि अवयवयोः I ate one letter over here. अवयवयोः अभ्यस्त संज्ञा भवति, तस्य विषये इदम् उदाहरणम् अस्ति. It turns out that there is also a subset of dhatus of adadi gana that are called abhyasta. So if you go to the dhatu patha, use the filters over here. Tatra antargane the pasyamashe tatra jakshityadihi iti antarganah asti. If you select this jakshityadihi, you will see 7 dhatus. All these 7 dhatus are also called abhyasta. They are not in juhotyadigana. They are all in adadigana. You can see there is no dvitva happening, but still by definition they are called abhyasta. The sutra is jakshityadayah shat. Abhyastam iti tatra vartate, jaksha iti dhatuhu and 6 more. So jaksha plus 6 more, that's a total of 7. Jaksha, so you have the list of dhatus over here. Jaksha, Jagru, Daridra, Chakasru, Shasru, Didhing and Viving. Ete sapta dhatavaha abhyasta samnyakaha santi. So abhyasta is a term that is used in the dvitva and outside the dvitva. Outside the dvitva, adadiganasya sapta dhatavaha abhyasta samnyakaha santi. And therefore, shnabhyastayorataha iti sutrasya etesham vishaye api prasaktihi asti. Now again, the shnabhyastayorataha sutram talks about akara lopa. If you go on the previous slide, akarasya lopaha bhavati. So even if all these 7 dhatus are actually abhyasta samnyaka, what really matters is which of these have akara in them. So atra kevalam daridra dhatau eva tatra akaraha vidyate. Agni abhyasta samnyakaha dhatavaha tatra bhinnam prayojanam asti tesham abhyasta samnyayaha. Parantu idanim tesham akaraha nasti atah shnabhyastayorataha iti sutrasya tatra na kinchana prayojanam. So the only example that you have is daridra. Daridra ityatra daridra plus lata vartamane lata. Lata shatrushana chava prathama samanadhikaran iti shatru adeshaha. Shatru ityasya upastitau sarvadhatuka pratyaya asti yata kartari shapa iti shapvikarna pratyaya. Adadiganasya dhatuhu atah atiprabhutibhya shapa iti shapaha luk. Tadanantaram daridra ityatra akaraha. Tasmad anantaram sarvadhatukaha nit pratyaya agacchati. Atah jakshityadesh iti abhyasta samnyayam siddhayam shnabhyastayo, typing mistake, shnabhyastayoratah ityatra akara lopaha pravartate. Daridr plus ata daridrat iti atra rupam siddhyati. Agre gacchamaha. So that completes the discussion of Sarvadhatuka Nita. Let's look at our list. So we are over here. Sarvadhatuka Nit Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam. We only have 2 more steps and we will stop. We'll talk about Nit Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam and we will talk about Guna Vriddhi Nishedhe Jayamanam Karyam. These 2 steps we will do and we'll stop. So Tatra Samanya Nit Pratyaya Vishishtam Karyam. So now the karya that happens for a general Nit Pratyaya, whether it is Sarvadhatuka and Ardhadhatuka, and obviously the first of them is Aniditam Halopadhaya Kingiti. Aniditam Halopadhaya Kingiti. See, there are some sutras that we actually have seen multiple times in Ardhadhatuka Prakriya. They somehow magically appear in the Sarvadhatuka Prakriya. Even on the next slide, I'm going to show some of these. So Aniditam Halopadhaya Kingiti. Tatra Nit Pratyaha. Kaha kaha Nit Pratyaha? Shan, Shnu, Sh, Shna, Shatru, Shanach. All these are Nit Pratyas. Nitvat Bhavataha. Bhavanti. Ete sarve Nitvat Bhavanti. Ataha etesham vishaye asya sutrasya prasaktihi asti. So examples are given. Basically, you have aniditva dhatu. So nakara has to be present in the dhatu, in the upadeshika form, and then the nakara will go away. So kunsa iti divadiganasya dhatu asti, tatra nakarasya lopaha bhavati. Danbha iti dhatu asti, tatra nakarasya lopaha bhavati. Drunpa iti dhatu asti, tatra nakarasya lopaha bhavati. Bandha tatra nakarasya lopaha bhavati. Aniditam halopadhaya kiti. Agrimam sutram gamahana jana khana ghasam lopaha iti anangi. Again, we have seen this sutra in while talking about the kit or nit pratyas earlier in the Krudanta Prakaram, but these somehow appear in case of the Sarvadhatuka Prakriya also. Gama, hana, jana, khana, tatha ghasa ityetesham anganam upadhavarnasya ityukte akarasya lopaha bhavati. So gama, hana, jana, ghana, khana, ghasa इत्येतेषाम् उपधावरणस्य लोपः भवति. कुत्र कुत्र भवति? अजादौ प्रत्यये कीति परतः. We can ignore anangi for now. So when there is an ajadi kit pratyaya over here, so again kit pratyaya is there. That's the condition. If the kit pratyaya, ajadi kit pratyaya is there, or nit pratyaya, when I say kit plus nit, so ajadi nit pratyaya is there, tatra etesham upadhavaranyasya lopah bhavati. Now interesting point to note is gama dhatuh bhadigane asti. अतः गम धातोः विषये तत्र शप इति विकरण प्रत्ययः विधीयते. So shatru is never directly in front of dhatu. They will always be shapa, and shapa is not a kit or a nit pratyaya. अतः गम धातोः विषये सार्वधातुक प्रक्रियायाम् अस्य सूत्रस्य प्रसक्तिः नास्ति. Similarly, khana dhatu इति भ्वादिगणस्य धातुः, घस्स इति कश्चन भिन्नः धातुः भ्वादिगणस्य धातुः अस्ति. So एतेषां धातूनां विषये गम, खन तथा घस एतेषां सर्वेषां विषये भ्वादिगणत्वात् तत्र शप प्रत्ययः आगच्छति. शप प्रत्ययः नित नास्ति, यद्यपि अजादिः अस्ति. अतः एतेषां सर्वेषां विषये अत्र अस्य सूत्रस्य प्रसक्तिः नास्ति. सो गम, हन तथा गम, खन तथा घस इत्येतेषां विषये सार्वधातुक प्रक्रियायाम् अस्य प्रसक्तिः नास्ति. Now there is a jana dhatu, which are actually 2 jana dhatus. There is a jana dhatu of divadigana jani pradurbhave. Tatra kim bhavati pashyamah. Divadiganasya jana dhatuh asti. Tatra shana iti vikarana pratyaya vidhiyate. Now shana is definitely nita, but it is not ajadi. Understand the 2 conditions, ajadi and nita. Shapa was ajadi, but it was not nita. Now shana is nita, but it is not ajadi. And therefore, again, for jani pradurbhave, for divadigana jayate iti rupam bhavati, tasya vishaye asya sutrasya prasakti na vidyate. So jani pradurbhave ityetasmat vihita shan pratyah ajadihi nasti, tasya vishaye asya sutrasya prasakti na vidyate. So who is the only candidate? The only candidate is this hana. And then there is another jana dhatu in juhotyadi gana. In third gana, there is a jana dhatu. It was there in the list that we saw earlier. So that jana dhatu we can take, because then there will be direct shatru pratyaya in front of it, because the vikarana pratyaya is going away because of shlu. So tatra etayoho dvayoho eva atra udaharanam drishyate. Pashyamah prakriyam pashyamah. It's a little complex. So hana plus lata, lata becomes shatru, shatru becomes ata, hana plus ata. I have omitted some steps. Tatra shak iti vikarana pratyaya bhavati, tasya luk bhavati, adadi asti atah. At this particular point in time, this gama hana jana khana ghasam ityanena akarasya lopah bhavati. Upadhayaha ityukte akarasya lopah bhavati. So ha plus a plus na, a will go away, ha plus na, and something very interesting happens over here. A sutram that you cannot really imagine being a part of Sarvadhatuka Prakriya comes and shows this effect. Ho hanter ninneshu. We have seen this sutra multiple times. We have seen it about Nritta Pratyayas and Nitta Pratyayas. So ho hanter ninneshu ityanena sutrena kim bhavati? Nritta Pratyaya asti, no chet Nitta Pratyaya asti. Tarhi hakarasya tatra kutvam ghakarah bhavati. But if you look at this ho hanter ninneshu in details, there are three different conditions over there. Tatra yita pratyaya, look at this. Hanadhatoho angasya hakarasya kutvam bhavati. Yit pratyaya pare, rit pratyaya pare, or nakare pare. If any of these three conditions are satisfied, you get a kutva. So ho hantehe ninneshu. Tatra nakaraha asti chedapi asya sutrasya prasaktihi vidyate. So here what is happening, when as soon as a is removed, you get a na over here, and in presence of na, ha becomes gha. A very beautiful and a unique example where one letter of anga causes a change in another letter of the same anga. Ange vidyamanam antimam varnam nimitta rupena srikrutya ange vidyamanasya prathama varnasya parivartanam bhavati. You will not find such examples at all in any prakriyas. Very unique example where the last letter of the same anga transforms the first letter of the same anga. Hana is, I think, the only case where such a particular transformation can happen. So ha becomes gha, gha plus na, and then you have ghnata iti atra rupam siddhati. Jani jana janane iti dhatuhu. Let me repeat this. Jani pradurbhava ityasya vishayena prasaktir nasti. Jana janane iti dhatuhu. Tatra lat tasya shatru ata dvitvam abhyasa karyam bhavati. So ja plus jana. So ja plus na. Tatra akarasya lopah bhavati. Ja plus na. And then ja becomes ya because of stoshtunashtu. Exactly the reverse is happening. The first letter of the anga affects the last letter of the anga. See how beautiful prakriya is this. In the previous example, the last letter affected the first letter. In this example, the first letter of the anga affects the last letter of the anga. You have ja plus ya, stoshtunashtu ityanena shrutvam, jadnyata iti rupam siddhati. So the reason why I place these two prakriyas simultaneously next to each other is to show this particular effect. In both these prakriyas, one component of the anga is affecting the other component. In the first prakriya, the last letter affects the first letter. In the second prakriya, the first letter affects the last letter. Agre gacchamaha. Ki pratyaya vishishtam tritiyam karyam mrujervadhi iti mruja dhatoho angasya ikaha ityukte rukarasya vruddhihi bhavati. तत्र एकं वार्तिकम् अस्ति इति अजादौ वा इष्यते. अजादि ङित् प्रत्यय अस्ति चेत् मृजेः वृद्धि इत्यत्र विकल्पेन वृद्धि भवति. सो मृजेर् वृद्धि एवरीबडी नोस्. तत्र विशेषः किम्? अजादि ङित् प्रत्यय अस्ति चेत् इयं वृद्धिः विकल्प्यते. सो मृज प्लस शत्रु, मृज प्लस अत, अदादिगणस्य धातुः अस्ति, शप् प्रत्ययः गच्छति, तस्य लुक् भवति. At this particular point in time, किङिति च इत्यनेन वृद्धिनिषेधः. So this mrujer vruddhi is blocked by kiñiti cha, but that further gets blocked by kiti ajado va ishyate. So ajadi kit pratyasti vikalpena vruddhi bhavati marja iti krutva marjata pakshe vruddhim vina mrujata iti atirupam siddhati. So mrujer vruddhi iti sutram. Next sutram, shvoho shud anunasike cha. Again, yet another piece where, very beautiful sutra where you will not imagine this sutra being part of Sarvadhatuka Prakriya, but you see this sutra be used in Sarvadhatuka Prakriya. Chvoho shud anunasike cha. We have studied this sutra extensively in Nishtha Prakaranam. Satukasya chasya vasya sha tatha ut etau adesho bhavataha. So the ta plus cha becomes sha and va becomes ut. Anunasike kvau jhaladau cha kiñiti. So shud anunasike, that particular part is of our interest right now. Jhaladau kingiti we have seen while talking about nishtha pratyas. Kvau we have seen the same sutra while talking about kvip. Right now let's focus on the last component anunasike. Khav iti kriyadiganasya dhatuh asti वकारांत धातुः श्ना इति तत्र विकरण प्रत्ययः. You have अनुनासिक प्रत्यय in front. च्वोः षूड अनुनासिके च इत्यनेन वकारांत धातोः अनुनासिके किङिति प्रत्यय परे. So this is the अनुनासिक नित प्रत्यय. अस्य उपस्थितौ वकारस्य ऊठ इति आदेशः इत्येधत्यूट्सु इति वृद्धिः खौनत. Very beautiful. खौनत इति अत्र रूपं सिद्ध्यति. So these are some real masterpieces in Prakriya that make all this particular thing very interesting. So chvoho shud anunasike cha iti tatram tatra nit pratyay vishishtam karyam. So we had 4 important karyas. Let me explain, mention these once again, because when it comes to general nit pratyay karyas, we always think of examples in the ardhadhatuka khanda. Here it is a chance to think of the examples in the sarvadhatuka khanda. So we have aniditam halopadhaya kingiti, we have gamahana janakhanaghasam lopaha kityanangi, we have rujer vruddhi and chvoho shud anunasike cha. Tatra antimam karyam etat svikritya viramamaha. So the last karya in this list is guna vruddhi nishedhe jayamanam karyam. So nit pratyay vishishtam karya tatra kingiti cha ityanena guna vruddhi yada bhavati tada guna vruddhi nishedhe kinchana karyam pravartate. So hruda iddhatoho ityanena rukarantasya angasya ikaradesha bhavati. So jrisha dirgha rukarantasya. So jrisha ityatra jru tasya jir iti bhavati. Gru ityatra gir iti bhavati. So, and then you have girata or gilat achi vibhasha iti vikalpena latvam. We'll see that in the tripadi. And udoshtha purvasya. So pru ityatra pira ityasya sthane pura iti bhavati. So oshthyah varnah asti rukarat dirgha rukarat purvam tadantasya dhatoho angasya ukaradeshah bhavati. So pru ityasya pura iti bhavati. Va asti chedapi tatra ukaradeshah bhavet saha api oshthyah varnah अन्यत्र सर्वत्र इकारादेशः भवति. उभयत्र उरण्ड्रपरः इत्यनेन सह रपरः भवति. So that is basically, I think that's the only guna vruddhi nishedha vishishta karyam. So that brings us to the end of today's class, or the interval of Shatrushanich Prakriya. Adyatana varge anaimittikam anga karyam, sarvadhatuka pratyay vishishtam karyam, pit pratyay vishishtam, nit pratyay vishishtam, general kit pratyay. This was my favorite, one of the very interesting set of prakriyas. And guna vruddhi nishedhe jayamanam karyam. Swastinana varge ajadi pratyay pare some bunch of 7-8 karyas for ajadi pratyaya, 7-8 karyas for shit pratyaya, and some 2-3 karyas for remaining them, and some significant, very beautiful shastra aspect of ane mukha. So ane mukha iti sutram svikritya 15, 20, 25 minutes we'll talk about what various commentaries have talked about this. So etat sarvam कृत्वा श्वस्तन वर्गे शत्रु तथा शानच प्रत्ययोः प्रक्रियायाः अध्ययनं समापयामः. So we'll stop here. We are almost out of time. Tatra abhyasam pashamah. अधोदत्तानां सूत्राणाम् एकवाक्येन स्वभाषया अर्थं विलिख्य शत्रुशानच प्रक्रिया विशिष्टम् उदाहरणं दत्त. So शींगः सार्वधातुके गुणः, श्नसोरल्लोपः और अधिप्रभृतिभ्यः शपः, अनिदितां हलोपधायः किङिति, होहन्तेर्निन्नेषु मृजे वृद्धि, एतत् सर्वं एतेषां सर्वेषाम् एकवाक्येन अर्थं विलिख्य प्रक्रिया विशिष्टम् उदाहरणं लेखनीयम्. द्वितीयः प्रश्नः, भगवद्गीतायां विद्यमानानि कानि अपि 10 शत्रुशानच प्रत्ययान्त रूपाणि ससूत्रं साधयत. So pick up any 10, and specifically I gave Bhagavad Gita because chapter 5 itself has one shloka with 8 different forms or 7 different forms. So but I mean, you can take variety. It's not necessary you pick everything from that particular shloka. I mean, I would prefer if you take 5 Shatru and 5 Shanach, but it's completely left up to you. So Bhagavad Gita vidyamani kani api dash vidyamanani kani api dasha. Please do only 10. I know there are a lot of enthusiastic people who will probably come up with 100, but we'll not discuss those in the class. Only 10. Kani api dasha Shatrushanach pratyayanta rupani sasutram sadhayata. The gist of this question is that you should also write the Subanta Prakriya, because in Bhagavad Gita you won't have a Pratipadika sitting over there. There will be forms which are padas, which are Subantas. So you start with the dhatu, create the Shatru Pratyayanta or Shanach Pratyayanta form, and do the Subanta Prakriya on the top of it. So Sasutram etani sarvani sadhayata. There is one question that I can take because we have some 2-3 minutes left. It's actually a simple question. This is about aniditam halupadayaha kingiti. Tatra aniditam halupadayaha kingiti. Is it only for the halanta dhatus? That is correct. So for example, ni iti dhatuho asti, ajanta dhatu asti, tasya sahapi anidit asti, tasyapi upadhayam nakarah vidyate, parantu ni dhatoho vishe nakara lopah na bhavati. So aniditam halaha upadhayaha kingiti. Dhatu should be anidit, it should be halanta, that's halaha. Upadhayaha, the nakar should be in the upadha, and it should have a kit or nit pratyay in front. Then only tasya nakarasya lopaha bhavati. So that's it. Samapayamaha. Shvaha asmineva samaye punaha vargaha bhavishyati. Shvastana varge anyani angakaryani pashyamaha. Shatrushanat pratyayo adhyanam च श्वः समाप्यते. अष्टाध्यायी जगन्माता यस्य चित्तात् समुत्थितः वेदानामपकाराय तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. शब्द ब्रह्म समाराध्य कृतवान्यो विलक्षणं सर्वाश्चर्यमिदं शास्त्रं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. येन धौता गिरः पुंसां विमलैः शब्दवारिभिः तमश्चाज्ञानजं भिन्नं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. धन्यवादः.